Hey, Charlie, have you heard that Indeed defines entry-level roles now as requiring 3 years of experience?
What the F? Dude, I've heard the term re-entry, but in this case, we really have to think about pre-entry instead.
Well, sounds like from my perspective, whether it's re-entry, pre-entry, it sounds like there's no free entry. What the F?
Hey, welcome guys. This is JobReady podcast. I am Charlie, the entrepreneur.
I'm Jeff, the brand guy.
And I remain Professor James.
In one of our previous episodes, Gary Bowles referred to Gen Z and Gen Alpha as the whole different species and that they are digital natives. They make up a very significant part of our current workforce and future workforce.
Yeah, when Gen Z is going to make up 27% of the global workforce by 2025 and 30% by 2030, and that's global. Employers are going to have to look deeply at how we help them enter and matriculate through the U.S. workforce, right?
Yeah. Speaking as a professor, I know a little bit about Gen Z firsthand, including student impressions and expectations of the workplace beyond the degree itself. And call me old-fashioned, but I still believe it's part of our mission as an educator to help prepare them for those realities beyond the degree, and we try our best with experiential learning being a primary focus.
Awesome. Well, let's dig into it, guys. Jeff, we have a guest today in the studio. Would you do the honor to introduce?
We sure do. And it is my honor and my pleasure to introduce Charles Westrin. Charles has spent his career in online ed tech at scale in a variety of strategy, product, and GM leadership roles in companies that span across higher education institutions, content and service providers, and platform companies. Charles joined BCG as Managing Director and Chief Product Officer at BCGU, a global specialty business within BCG that delivers transformative upskilling outcomes to BCG at speed, scale, and with a measurable ROI. BCGU partners with clients to close the talent and skills gaps standing between organizations and the realization of their transformational goals by delivering customized upskilling solutions at scale that align, equip, and mobilize for impact. Charles, so great to have you here today. Are there any context that you think the audience should know that I left out?
No, you did a great job. We're a pleasure to be here and looking forward to digging in with everybody.
Hey, Charles, what does the U stand for in BCGU?
Great question, Professor James. The U stands for upskill, not to be confused with university. So BCGU, we upskill, we unleash, we unlock talent.
Awesome. We're super excited to dig into entry-level roles, early career, and how they're changing. And you've been addressing the talent gap that employers have, not only at the entry level, but all the way up through the executive level too. So with that holistic perspective, it'd be great if you could help us ground our audience in terms of the new talent and skills that they need for the new entry-level roles, either entering for the first time or re-entering, like in terms of career change.
Of course, let's do it. So if we take a look at one of the big transformation arcs happening today, it's Gen AI, obviously. And so Gen AI is expected to handle roughly 32% of all entry-level work by some estimates, allowing those entry-level workers to free up some more time on more complex tasks. At the same time, AI is expected to change the skills needed for about 80% of the entry-level work. And in this case, who's left to deal with that skill gap? It's the employers. These are unlikely to happen through existing college grads or even what's available through your traditional MOOCs or online course providers. So really, there's a fundamental talent misalignment in the market today between what the skills employers are looking for entry level, not as well as middle management and even executive level in some case, and what's available in the market. And that's really the opportunity and the reason why behind BCGU was created a couple of years ago, is to help employers address that talent gap in a way that delivers high impact upskilling in alignment with the corporate objectives and what the employee needs to make sure that they maintain relevancy in their career.
Charles, it's interesting. People are opining about the potential for Gen AI to disintermediate, to change the workforce, to change the workplace. And I just wonder, do in your experience, do employers know the specific skills that they're looking for in that context, or are they asking you what those skills should be?
In a lot of cases, employers are still trying to figure it out. So, I mean, if you think about how Gen AI can update the entire workflow of a function, whether that's engineering or customer service or digital marketing or procurement, or even just frontline, kind of entry-level staff, the way that the work happens is continuing to evolve at an ever-increasing pace. And so where, even if an employee has been, well-performing in their job with a completely new set of tools at their disposal, new ways of working, new outcomes that employers are looking for, those employees are needing to be upskilled at a much more consistent and rapid basis. And that's putting a lot of stress on employers and also trying to figure out, what are those skills that the employees need in the context of the work that is today and in the context of the work that's probably going to continue to change over the course of the coming years.
Hey, Charles, a lot of the issues that you share, I think is really top of mind for a lot of employers as well as incoming workforce as well, because we're seeing the job market today is a little bit soft, right, compared to just a couple of years ago. Tell me something I don't know that I should know about. If I'm an employer, if I'm in the audience listening to this, tell me something I don't know.
So I found this stat amazing. So if you look across leaders today, 90% of leaders know that their workforce needs AI skills. Only 40% of those leaders still believe that AI creates value. So there's a gap there between knowing that the skills are needed, but not being quite clear about what exactly the value is. But then only 6% of those same leaders have started to actually upskill their teams on AI. And those three stats tell a really interesting story. So you know that there's going to be a lot of change in new skill sets needing. You're not quite sure what exactly those skill sets are yet. And there's an immense opportunity to start. Most people haven't even started. And so how do you start to close that gap between, just getting started on enabling the workforce to be prepared and then being able to extract that value as a corporation by saying, hey, my workforce is now aligned with the right sort of skills and talent to be able to deliver on the ways of working and, kind of the strategies that we're putting in place.
That's a great stat. I don't think I've heard that before. So certainly thanks for sharing that. It sounds to me like the challenge here is a lot of these leaders don't know what success looks like for themselves. Would you say that's to be fair, or what do you think is the bottleneck is?
Well, it's a great point. And that's one of the reasons why, kind of BCGU started to develop the relationship. So with BCG, obviously, a lot of our relationships with our clients start with the strategy definition, right? And so if you put yourself into the shoes of a CEO today, think about the situation that they're looking for, right? They know that their shareholders are expecting them to transform the business with more speed, with more scale, with more efficiency than ever. At the same time, they know that they don't have the talent in the workforce to do it. So a lot of our engagements with employers actually start with that strategy and thinking through the blueprint of the talent and skills that is necessary, and then figuring out how do you close that gap, and then how do you close that gap at scale. So let me give you an example of that. We're currently working with a North America retail banker, and they're looking to completely transform the retail banking experience. Thousands of retail banks, 39,000 employees, really big transformation, kind of bogey around what sort of value they think they can extract from here. So we started going in, we're working with the bank to, kind of define what that future retail banking looks like. Next step is to do a little bit of a blueprint to say, these are the skills that our retail bank associates have today, and these are the skills that they're going to need in the future. And then how do we build the right sort of custom upskilling solution to take that sort of employee base from point A to point B with speed, with scale, in the context of the strategy, in the context of the new skills that they're going to be needing, and with the ability to, at the end of the delivery, to say, hey, this was a really good ROI. This ROI made a lot of sense because we were able to extract that new value that otherwise we wouldn't be able to do. It's really easy for, not really easy. It is a starting point to say, here's the strategy. But if you don't actually change the way that your workers are doing the work, that strategy is just going to stay an aspiration as opposed to a real value delivered for an organization.
Hey, let me double click into that a little bit more. I mean, I see the strategy component and I get it. And let me just kind of share with you my own experience in our organization, because all of us, we didn't grow up with technologies the same way it's so pervasive today, right? And so for us, we recognize as our company that we need to bring AI into the mix and the latest technology into the mix. But we ourselves, while we fall squarely in the stats that you mentioned, but how do we use those technology? We're unclear ourselves. And so if we're unclear ourselves, how do we define beyond strategy, right? The day-to-day success of what it looks like, what it should be like for the technology adoption and usage. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so great question. So let's talk about another client case that we're working on right now. So for a client, global client that we're working with, their data and technology team developed a number of new customized proprietary Gen AI tools. And they rolled these tools out with really high, kind of revenue expectations, efficiency gain expectations. And what they realized was that none of the tools were being used. So they had made this big investment in the underlying data and tools and infrastructure, and nobody was using it. And so what they did is they came to BCGU and they said, hey, help us, one, educate our workforce on, kind of Gen AI in general, kind of just get the baseline foundation understanding of what is an LLM. How should we be thinking about using these tools responsibly? How do we think about, kind of the integration of these tools? And then we can start to talk about how should we embed these tools into the day-to-day work and actually utilize it. And so in the course of our upskill that we provide, not only are we providing that foundational skill set, but we're also giving the employees a chance to leverage the tools that their technology team developed. And so it becomes much more practical application. It's not just the theory, it's actually getting your hands dirty and rolling up your sleeves and thinking about how am I going to do my job differently tomorrow in order to be able to, take advantage of these great new tools that are out there. That's one of the examples that we're trying to, about how we're trying to address these gaps for our clients.
Yeah, that's a great example, Charles. Thanks for sharing that. And one of the things that I would like to share is that actually college and university graduates now, I believe, are close to being almost ideal people, especially from institutions that are already incorporating AI across the curriculum, not just computer science, but University of Florida, we got anthropologists and artists and people that are studying medicine, et cetera, getting fluency in that. And my prognostication is that as AI becomes more of a utility at the societal level, then of course at the business level, that those that are already familiar with it are going to, and the younger people, just like in previous jumps in technology, they're the folks that sort of live with it. I mean, I can't tell you how many times now when I've asked for presentations, the stuff coming back is just full of generative AI, text and pictures and images and stuff. And these guys are doing that on their own. See? And so this is where, even the notion of some reverse mentoring between graduates and folks that have already developed some fluencies, maybe not in the specific software or generative AI of the corporation, but in the overall why and when do you use it, so that some of these CEOs might like to listen to some of these college grads and go, yeah, click on that. And that's one thing that I'd like to just put in, coming from a higher ed perspective, that I do feel that Gen Z and those that are already working with it almost on a daily, if not weekly basis, could be one of the more appropriate cohorts, if you will, to come in and then refine their understanding with the specifics of what's been developed for that particular corporation.
Carriers of a paradigm, right? So that's really interesting. So Charles, there's this specific training that you wind up at BCGU designing based on an assessment of what they need, right? So you're going deep, and just correct me if I'm wrong here. It sounds like the problem that you encountered in that last case study was that classic engineering issue where if I build it, they will come, because they built those solutions, but nobody came. So you need to, the work you do is even more essential in that case. But I mean, let's get back to this early career talent notion that James is broaching. If entry-level talent is, let's say at a university, gaining this familiarity with Gen AI, right? With the paradigm of Gen AI. And they move into an organization. Number one, I'm curious, is the organization exploring what experience they have with Gen AI as they're coming in? And how, what do you think the uptake is for the type of training, that Gen AI training that you're working on with that new talent? Is it better? Is it worse? Is it different? What's the situation?
It's a great question. So I was chatting with a colleague recently who had been doing some product learner interviews with college students. And when he asked an aspiring lawyer about, if he thought that the legal profession was going to change due to Gen AI, the response was I don't really think about it at all, big deal, right? But then when he, continued to probe, and said, well, as you're preparing for class, as Professor James was saying, what are the tools you use? And he's like, oh, well, I use Gen AI to help me define my briefs and all of these things. And so it's almost become for, kind of the entry level profession. You don't even think about it as Gen AI. It's just another tool in the tool set, right? It's like the same way we think about going to Google to get our answers corrected. And so, what you're going to see there, I think, is a little bit of, kind of a generational gap in terms of those younger learners who are going to be entering the workforce are just going to consider Gen AI as just another tool, no different than the tools that they use today. Whereas you have these, kind of entry or, more, learners workers who have been in the workforce a little longer, and they're going to have a bigger skill gap to be able to address and work in this new environment where that's going to be.
But is that experience good for them in terms of getting the job? That stat, we keep coming back at this. Well, I kind of shake my head about it. But this idea that entry level requires 3 years of experience. That sounds outlandish to me. It's got to be 3 years. I feel like I'm shooting myself in the foot if I start defining my entry level positions that way. It's way too general, and it's kind of impossible to get quality talent that is willing to take that entry level with that 3 years of experience. The experience that people are looking for is any of this kind of native Gen AI skill being factored in as an attractive factor. You probably work with human resources a lot, right? Do you guys talk about that with them? Are they quantifying the value of that?
Well, it's interesting. Actually, a lot of our conversations today are more with business leaders and CEOs. And so it's almost raised the profile of the skill gap, because for a long time, Jeff, you're pointing out something. For a long time, the issues of what are the employee skill sets was an HR issue, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't a fundamental strategic concern of a business leader. And, in that case now, as we see the, kind of the need for this transformative change, the expectation that business leaders can drive that transformative change, and then the gap of the skill sets, it's becoming a fundamental business need that is now on the CEO agenda. And so, one of the interesting things that I always think about, and this is actually part of the generation story of why BCGU existed, was that, BCG has this great framework, as all consulting companies do, right? 10-20-70. When you're going through any sort of transformation, 10% of the solution is in the algorithms, right? What are you doing in the LLM, et cetera? 20% is in having the right technology and data stack and access to the right, data. But 70% of the value is actually in the people and the processes and the new ways of working. And so that 70% has for a long time been frankly ignored, I believe, or brushed under the rug of just, give them the technology, they'll use it. That's, it's what's expected. That's no longer the case today. And that's where we're seeing a lot of companies saying, hey, look, even if I'm looking at my entry level or my mid-career professionals, there's still a fundamental talent gap between what are the skill sets I need and the skill sets they have today. And I can't go out in the market and find anybody to deliver in that. And that's where the BCGU value proposition really comes in. We help those companies address that 70% of the gap.
So how do you get what passes for AI natives in terms of Gen Z to get from point A to point B. If they already have a way that they tackle things, they already have technology they use, they're given this other technology. I mean, I feel like if somebody told me at entry level that I needed to use it, I would just kind of like go, okay, I'll use it. But are they opinionated? Like, how do you do it? How do you create traction?
Well, we know what entry level and Gen Z learners like, right? There's 4 things that make great upskilling solutions. One is that it needs to be active and personalized learning. So it can't just be theoretical. It needs to be kind of in the context of the job that they're asked to do, whether that's as a customer solutions or, kind of entry level retail banker. So it needs to be active and personalized. Second, they don't just want to click through, right? That's been one of the challenges for years with, kind of like with upskilling is let me just click through this as quickly as possible so I can get on with the rest of my day. So it needs to be visual. It needs to be engaging. It needs to be micro learning. It needs to be, video. It needs to be interactive. Third, we know that there needs to be communication and collaboration and community. So what are the social aspects? How do you create those internal connection points between the various employees going through this so that they can, kind of build on that and learn how to integrate the skill sets they have into the existing context of whatever the job is requiring. And then fourth, and this is the most important thing, I think, it has to have a purpose. If we're asking employees to just like click through without any sort of impact on their end career or their job or the ability for them to do their job better, they are quickly going to figure that out. And it's just going to be the same thing as compliance, right? So like make sure that it's embedded in that workflow. And so like when you think about like, how can you develop upskilling solutions that address those 4 needs, that's how you start to make it engaging. That's how you start to make it, kind of like impactful for the individual employee and impactful for the organization. Because, the organization is saying, how can we get this group of thousands of employees to quickly upskill in a way that like links directly back to my strategic objectives, not in a way that is like fragmented or I'm asking the employee to figure out how their skill sets needs to be evolved. There needs to be that clear connection from the top to the bottom. And that's one of the things that I think we haven't usually seen in the upskilling solutions in the market today.
Hey, Charles, a lot have been highlighted around Gen AI. I mean, it seems like that's the shiny object at the moment. And my friend Jeff Nelder here would tell me, hey, Charlie, AI is table stakes. So even you shouldn't even talk about it anymore. It's given, right? And so, which I agree. But let's switch gear a little bit and talk about another aspect for early career talent or college talent coming out that we're seeing, which is soft skills. I mean, a lot have been talk about this, right? In terms of job readiness, soft skill being a big part. Love to kind of get your take on it. Where do you think that is in terms of, is that still going to be, there's still a huge heartburn for a lot of these folks? Or, I mean, anyway, let me just pause there and I want to flip the paradigm a little bit. Let's start there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think soft skills are going to continue to be incredibly impactful. And here's an interesting, kind of observation from the market. So a few years back at a previous employer, we would convene a roundtable of CHROs and they would talk about what are the skill sets that they need. And so, big Fortune 100 companies, you would talk around the table and they would say, what are the skill sets that you need today? And it would be, ability to communicate, data analysis, ability to influence without authority, ability to, project management. And we would say those, 21st century digital skills, right? Both the soft skills and the hard skills, kind of the heads around the room would nod, right? And say, yeah, that's what we need. And then you would start to talk about, okay, so like, would you be willing to pay to like upskill your employee base with those first century digital skills, which we all just agreed, were critical to the success. And it'd be like crickets, right? Like I don't have the business case for it. And now all of a sudden with the advent of Gen AI and these tools, there's a really interesting wedge issue that's occurring where if you think about what is necessary to get the full benefit from being able to do prompt engineering or utilize some of the Gen AI tools, critical thinking, data analysis, ability to do good written communication, ability to have kind of influence without authority. All of the same things that were required a couple of years ago, now all of a sudden have a really interesting use case for why they drive business impact. And so what we're finding actually is a lot of times when, an organization will come to us and say, hey, we need help with, kind of implementing Gen AI in a given process or towards a given business end. What we actually find when you start looking through the curriculum is, yes, there's Gen AI tool sets and there's Gen AI foundational knowledge, but there's also communication, critical thinking, data analysis, and everything else. It's just that we now have a very critical use case to be able to do that. So that's part of the things that I think we're seeing right now is it's the soft skills, 21st century digital skills continue to be really important. They just have now a different place that they are incorporated and that employers are looking for.
Let me flip it a little bit just for your reaction on here, because we often talk about, wow, the Gen AI, the new workforce, they don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to work in a team. They don't know how to, there's a lot of friction because there's multiple generations in the workforce today, right? But we know Gen Z and Gen Alpha are going to be larger and larger. At some point, they're probably the dominant generation in the workforce today. So at what point do we communicate like they do? I'm saying we here because I'm a Gen X, so I'm more comfortable with a handshake and face-to-face and a lot more picking up the phone as opposed to sending a text. But at what point do older generations in the workforce have to comply with the dominant generations in the workforce who are much more digital natives, who operate certain way, who communicate certain way, who work certain way?
It's a great question. I don't have the answer for you. I don't know. And I'd be curious to hear what you all think. I mean, if you think about it, the iPhone is 14 years old-ish at this point. For Gen Alpha, they are probably 5 to 10 years out from really joining the workforce at scale. If you think about, kind of OpenAI and ChatGPT, that's coming up on 2 years, and think about the exponential change that's even occurred in those 2 years. I don't think we have any idea about what are the communications, what are the technologies, what are the kind of tools that we're going to have at our disposal in 5 or 10 years. And so that's where it becomes even more exciting to think about, okay, as the technology continues to advance so quickly, as the expectations around that continue to advance, how are companies going to harness that in a way that, kind of allows them to put the people, process, and technology together in order to deliver on their strategic objectives and their transformation objectives? It's going to be fascinating to follow.
Yep, Charles, I think that your sense of not having the answer is the answer. And the overall progression, as we see this sort of not even logarithmic but exponential, but it's almost getting, totally vertical. If a member of our audience wants to learn more about the work that you are doing with BCGU, what would you tell them to view or read or where to go to learn more about your sort of day-to-day world?
Yeah, thank you, Professor James. So the first place I would go is there's an article that we just released, 5 must-haves for effective AI upskilling. I would start there. It gives a great overview on some of the, kind of lessons we've learned early in our journey, and gives really practical examples of how some of our, companies and clients that we've been working with have been able to address this. Second, go out to bcg.com, type in BCGU. You'll be directed right there. You can go there and find more. And third, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always interested in meeting new folks and, having more discussions. Give me a ping and we'll look forward to having a chance to get introduced.
Hey, Charles, really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. Fascinating. I mean, I know we can go hours and hours on this topic, and I love to dig in with you a little bit more in the future as you learn more how actually companies are not just targeting the early career for job readiness, but the current workforce to accommodate a significant and even growing. Really appreciate it. And please come back again and see us soon in the future. With that, on behalf of JobReady, this is Charlie, the entrepreneur.
And Jeff, the brand guy.
And I remain Professor James.
Well, thank you again, Charles Westrin, for Boston Consulting Group University, or is that just BCGU?
Yes, BCGU. The U is for upskill, not university.
There you go. Well, appreciate your sharing the important work with us and also the insight to our audience today. Appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. As ever, big gratitude and respect to not only to Charles, but to our audience as well. And if you enjoy listening to JobReady, it's an employer-funded financial aid podcast. You can visit us on the EFFA site at effa.io/JobReady, all one word. EFFA helps employers source, vet, and prepare university talent.
And again, Charles, thank you for being with us and for also letting us know that, the university and the Upskill are part of a similar solution, not in competition with each other. Just kidding about that. But again, we really appreciate you coming on today. And that's a wrap, folks. We are effing over and out.
Awesome.